ZN Life is brought to you by ZN, the OG digital agency in Brussels.
Live from the internet, it's ZN Live. I'm Phil Weiss, CEO and founder of ZN, and I want to welcome you to episode 400. So very exciting episode, and for this we have a very special guest, an EU influencer on LinkedIn, somebody who has extensive experience in communication from the EU Commission to the Parliament to the world of public affairs, advising on finance, and on a number of different issues, and specifically looking at CEOs and other areas. I want to welcome Emőke Péter. I hope I got the pronunciation correct. Very happy to have you on the show. And I want to start with the question, I think on everybody's mind. We have just been through the US election. We've entered into a Trump world, or Trump 2.0 world. So what is your reaction? You posted about this on LinkedIn. What is your reaction of the impact this is going to have as far as you're concerned?
Thank you very much, Phil, and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me here. Absolutely, the US elections will have an impact not only on the transatlantic relationship, but also on the geopolitical landscape in general and the international cooperation on major fields like trade, climate, security, especially security. So for me, the way I interpret it is it was a wake-up call, another wake-up call for Europe, and this election in a way reminds us of the fact what we already knew with the Draghi report, with the letter report, that Europe is sometimes a little bit too vulnerable and too dependent. So we really need to reflect here on how do we want to position ourselves in the future, and really need to stand up on our feet, create a strong, independent European Union, which is also economically robust. And this time probably we really need to take this seriously, like our life depends on it, because probably it does. So how I see is there are 4 critical areas where we have a sort of to-do list or homework. First, competitiveness. There is no secret. Draghi and Letta both emphasize that we need to invest in productivity and innovation. And really, we know that we need to work on this. At the same time, who gonna finance it and how this practically will work is a little bit at the moment not yet clear within the member states. Secondly, climate change. Collaborating with the US on key challenges like the climate change probably won't be as it used to be in the past. But we need to really continue to act on this issue. And if anybody would have questions on that, just look at the pictures from Spain from the recent days. And then digitalization. We need to invest more into digitalization because we very much depend on the US in terms of infrastructure, from the cloud to platforms to microchips and digital networks. And this affects not only the industrial competitiveness of Europe, but also the functioning of our democracies. So, and lastly, but probably most crucially, we really need to invest in our defense mechanisms and capabilities, and this really serves our overall security and autonomy, because we already know that President Trump will question the support for Ukraine, and with that also sanctioning Russia will be quite complicated, if not possible. So the way I see is really a time where we need to unite the forces. Member states cannot play anymore this game that we are keep dividing and polarizing Europe, this is the time where we really need to act like one cohesive force and go forward together rather than divided.
Yeah, there's been some calls for this, so I think the conversation has started. Whether this will be a time when people get more divided and polarized or come together is I think, a fundamental one. Now, I think that for CEOs and for leaders, it's also a very difficult moment because they need to decide how to react to this, if they should react. Now, you've been advising leaders and CEOs for many years on their communication, their approach. So what would you tell them now? Some of them will be reacting, thinking this is terrible news. Some might say it's great news, depending on where they're coming from. Do you advise them to take a position, to communicate, to wait, to express concerns? What is your advice? How do you navigate this very challenging, I think, moment?
That's a really good question, and indeed I have been fortunate to work with many incredible executives, including our former CEO and now our current CEO, and a couple of executives from the company. So it has been a great learning experience. And what I really take away from these last couple of years, sometimes the best communication is really the most concise. So you really need to be straightforward and directly to the point, and this is the basics of communication. But besides being concise, there are other so-called the four C's of communication. So clarity, as mentioned, conciseness, curiosity, and candor. So just to break down, what does it really mean? So clarity is evident. If the message is not clear, and on the first hand it's not clear to you, then execution can go really wrong. Secondly, on conciseness, so really short, direct sentences, messages that are absorbable and that can be memorized easily. Then on curiosity, so any good conversation needs curiosity, or any kind of conversation, in fact. And for instance, what I learned with the executives, you are not really there to just present, but you are also there to sort of take insights and later act upon. So you really need the curiosity. And candor is really about being open and honest. So yes, and if we really want to break down what this practically would mean, with clarity, what helps clarity, for instance, before a presentation, break really your slide into a message. So what is the only one message that you want to convey here? That really has to be clear for you so that you can communicate later. Another thing, structure. So in such conversations, you really don't have it's not a novel, so it's not immediate rest, but you really need the context. So context. I used to have a former manager who always said that, okay, facts, but first you describe the context. And also on the structure, you really need to create a flow when you discuss with on such level. So first you're gonna tell them what you are going to tell them, and at the end you sort of summarize that this is what I told you. So it's really a link between the beginning and the end. And obviously preparation is significant. You really need to do the deep research, because you cannot control anything else in that moment. You just how prepared you are. And on the conciseness and curiosity, so what I learned is that the best questions are sometimes the most direct and the most simple. So just to make a parallel between Brussels, so it's really not a typical roundtable discussion or a hearing that we have seen this week. You need to be there to sense the direction of the other. So you cannot really create this kind of typical Brussels roundtable question where you have so much facts and figures that sometimes the question is longer than the answer, and sometimes you pack 6 questions into one. No, there you really need to be direct and understand the scenario and really sense the direction of travel. And also, whenever it's possible, remove the words. So you really need to drastically remove words that don't contribute to your message. And again, an example from my past, the same former manager who used to say to me before each of the presentations level that it's too wordy, and I knew that before opening the slide he would say that it's really executives and communication on that level, they don't really like wordy things. And about the candor, the last part, it's really about transparency and honesty. Be transparent about what you know and also about what you don't know. Probably you will investigate later and get back with the correct answer. But again, bringing back to the CEO communication, that it's not a panel discussion again, what we do in Brussels usually, that we get the questions and we feel like we don't really know the answer, but we are confident enough that we can turn around the answer in a way that we answer what we can answer. So there it's really difficult and different, because if you don't have the information and you tell something incorrectly, it can cause bad decisions. It can cause harm to the company or the institution or to the business. So this is really briefly about.
So, but just I want to just jump into the point you made about candor. I think it's a very useful framework. But if you're a CEO today, and you have strong opinions about the political climate, about the Trump administration, do you recommend that they express that? Because that can be a high risk. You have a lot of new things happening, and if you're going to be completely honest and transparent, and let's say you have issues, that could create a lot of drawbacks from the people you're communicating with. So how do you advise your CEOs to balance that? Their opinions versus the risk of expressing themselves directly when the environment is so unpredictable.
In my view, when you are in such a representative functions, it's 90% of the time it's not really about your own opinion. It's about an opinion which can be representative and which can be diplomatic. So it can, in a way, have certain elements of your own opinion, but you have to look at the broader picture. How does it represent my own institution? How does it represent the values that we stand for? So you really have to look beyond simple opinions.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. Now talking about how you deliver that message, we talked a lot at the EU Influencer event about the channels. You're obviously very active on LinkedIn. And there was a big question about LinkedIn versus X, which we're going to come to in a minute. But you recently posted about how you got a post view up to 20,000. And so maybe you can just share a bit of your takeaway from what communicators can do to get views and to get engagement on LinkedIn.
Yes, probably it did not happen overnight. So it's probably the result of multiple years of consistent work. I started to communicate online back in time in the Commission when I was working on election and democracy. And I did so because I felt like, being Hungarian, I was surrounded also by Hungarians, and I could see that the level of Euroscepticism is a little bit raising. Since that time, it rose a little bit more. And I felt that if we, the employees of the institutions, are not the ambassadors of this project, of this great project we call European Union, then who else would be? So I really started to communicate about EU decisions and how the EU decisions impact citizens and businesses. And this is how I started, firstly on Facebook, but then I saw that with time, Facebook started to lose traction. So I moved to LinkedIn. And then really, yes, in October, somewhere this happened that indeed over a week, I received 20,000 views for the posts. And that was the time when I really felt that, okay, by now, probably I should get rid of my imposter syndrome, and probably I should really focus on and create a post where I sort of debunk the misconceptions that I currently see on LinkedIn with digital communication, so that I help others to gain a competitive edge when they try to communicate digitally. So for instance, there are things that I remember from that post that, first of all, tagging. It's interesting because there is this common misconception that you have to tag a half page of people to really reach a crowd. But what actually happens, of course, if you tag more people will see at a certain point your post, potentially, if they are online, if they are connected. But at the same time, what you have to keep in mind is that tagging, in fact, backfires, because if the people who you tagged don't react within the first couple of hours, then it means that the algorithm will punish you and will decrease your reach. So this is something to strategically deliberate on, who are the people you really need and have to tag in a post. Or another example about the need to post every day. So I see that couple of, how to say, experts are saying that if you really want to be successful on LinkedIn, you need to post every day, but it's absolutely not true, because people already have a digital fatigue. So there is so much noise out there. So it's really about, do I add value? Is my content sort of quality content? So it's always about quality over quantity, and it's always about the value rather than superficial daily updates. And yes, there is another myth. For instance, timing is everything. Like the time when you post is really the most important factor, whether you will have a high reach or not. There used to be a time, for instance, 1 year ago, really the days of Tuesday and Thursday morning between 9 and 11 were the most valuable if you wanted to have a high reach. But guess what? Algorithms change. So algorithms changed over time. And at the moment, it really doesn't matter whether you post late in the evening or early in the morning. It has not much of significance anymore. Also about the format, so we tend to hear that videos perform well and PDFs and carousels not anymore. Yes, videos perform well if you have a good quality video and it really adds value. If you had just really average and you did not put the time into it, it won't. And also about PDFs, what I see in compliance sector, for instance, that's a field where PDFs perform the best. Like if you summarize some reports that are important for compliance, then you really get a high reach. And here is again about understanding your audience and understanding what they look for, rather than strategically trying to manipulate the format. And a last point here, what I see newly, there is this trend that we don't really post anymore links in the text body, because people are sort of scared that the algorithm will decrease their reach if they do so. Instead, they post the link as the first comment after they posted the post. So what happens there is that actually, if you are the first one to comment to your own post, then the algorithm will punish you even more and your reach will be much lower. So if I was somebody who wanted to really share a link, I would just do it in the text body, because it doesn't really worth the deliberation. Yeah.
No, very, very interesting and very practical feedback. So I think that we will be summarizing a lot of these points as you wrote in your own post. And actually, I completely agree with you with the whole consistency. It's actually a little difficult because I find that it's better to be relevant than to be consistent. So when we have the EU influencer event, I post a lot. There's and my team and a lot of people. There's a big conversation, and that gets a huge amount of traction over that period. And then things can quiet down for a bit, and then you have an issue or a topic that you want to get back into. So I feel that you can be more comfortable with the rhythm than obsessing about, oh my God, I have to post something every day, because I think you'll end up sounding like ChatGPT, saying, oh yeah, here are 5 things that you should do. It's like, don't post if you don't have anything to say. I think you're absolutely right. On the other side, what we're doing as an organization, as ZN, is we have a newsletter with a series of news topic, and that's, with this conversation, a number of other things, which gives us constant material, and that's done on a very consistent basis. Every week or every 2 weeks, we have a piece of news with lots of different things. So I think it's finding that balance between being flexible, but I think an organization probably needs a structure that allows them to have this kind of ongoing flow so people can keep up with what they're doing. So very interesting observations. Now, of course, LinkedIn is now the new kid on the block to some degree. When we, at our event, I asked a question with a show of hands. Most people were most comfortable with LinkedIn. Our data shows that X is still the most important channel for political news. We still have Parliament, Commission, journalists actually being on X. But I feel, my personal experience is that we get much more engaged conversations on LinkedIn. What is your feeling about the move, from perhaps X to LinkedIn and other channels? Instagram and TikTok are emerging as new channels. What is your view about this, and what do you think 25 might end up looking like with channel mix?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's an interesting question, and I remember within your event, a lady mentioned from the panel that there is something called path dependency. So
Yes.
that basically means that what you used to do, you keep doing, even if there are setbacks or if the platform doesn't work that well, because we are, as human beings, resistant to change. So for that, probably we will keep using both LinkedIn, who are on LinkedIn, and X, who are on X. What I think personally is that, for instance, we talked about EU political communication and communication of MEPs. So if you are an MEP and you are only on LinkedIn or only on X, what we saw from your report, like 600 MEPs are really on X, so the highest number of MEPs on any social platform. That means that you reach a certain type of audience. So what do you really reach on X? Mostly middle to high, how to say. So you have professionals, you have industry players, you have a lot of journalists. So that's really the crowd who pays attention to you. On LinkedIn, you mostly have the lobbyists who are really listening to you. So nowadays, I think you really cannot afford to focus on either one or two platforms. You really have to do multiple, especially if you are in such a political function, because you have to target the different segments of the demography, the different parts of the society, and you have to really see where is your voter base. So Facebook, in a way, it's still valuable. I see within a couple of MEPs who are doing great, for instance, with elderly population or people around 40, 50, 60. They are still using Facebook quite on a daily basis. So it's all about having a multi-channel approach and really seeing where is the audience that you want to reach. And it's really, So that was also interesting to see on your in your report that that Instagram and Facebook are really on a similar level, like over 500 MEPs. And that, again, I see some younger MEPs who are really active on Instagram and who are doing great, because younger generation tend to be there and tend to favor this kind of different type of communication, like quick videos, quick updates. So that's mostly multi-channel and seeing where your target group is based.
Yeah, a very good point. Sorry.
And in terms of, I did not answer your second question, how the future will look like, and what about X in the current circumstances with restrictions and compliance and so on. So I used to have a colleague who always said that I don't have the crystal ball. So I also don't have the crystal ball, but I think in the EU, people are committed to European values. And if you see that a platform really doesn't comply with the EU regulation, and if the restrictions are really burdensome, then they will sort of punish the platform by using it less or moving to another platform. So it's all about balancing compliance and seeing how the restrictions will go.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And essentially, we need to look at different channels. You can't rely on a single channel, and different audiences are navigating in different places. I think X is now becoming an official government channel of the Trump administration almost. So this is going to be very interesting, because it was an opposition channel, alt-right, driven by Elon Musk. Now the question is, what happens when it's aligned to Musk and Trump, and how will the X community feel about it? But I think it, as you said, path dependency makes this very difficult to change. We're seeing LinkedIn as this new conversation space where people are spending more time and feeling more comfortable, I think. But then also Instagram, TikTok are also, I think, going to be the next channels in the coming years, because you can see a new generation being very comfortable there. So interesting, but of course we don't know. And it's also good to have other things like your website, newsletter, etc., to make sure that you have all your different things. Also, Daniel is saying hello to us. And you mentioned climate change. In fact, Daniel is from the region of Valencia, and he's been active launching a campaign to help people in the region. So we will be also sharing about this on our channels. So please check it out. Now, when you meet people who want to start a career in Brussels, in the EU, in communication, what is your advice to them? This is one of my favorite questions. What are your words of wisdom to young people when they want to start their career?
That's a really good question. I believe the most important is to really know your why, because if you are not clear about the motivation, there will be days when it will be very challenging. So also the online communication, if you don't know why do you really do it and what audience it serves or what purpose it really serves, there will be days where you just don't feel like doing, or you will have other priorities and life just happens. So it's really being clear about the bigger goal and the audience that you serve and the purpose that you serve, and that will help you to get through all of this. Life happens even so called. Yeah.
Very good. Okay, so now we have time for our book recommendation. Roll jingle. So what is your recommendation? You're reading an interesting looking book, so tell us more about that.
So this is a book that I have with me today. Who Can You Trust? So it's a book from Rachel Botsman, and it's the subtitle so-called is How Technology Brought Us Together and Why It Could Drive Us Apart. So it's all about communication, technology, and trust. And it's a really interesting narrative I find. So for instance, did you ever think when when you purchased a good online and you did a digital payment, did you ever think about how many actors do you need to trust through the journey? Probably you didn't. You just think about that. This is the normal. I place that order and I will receive, and that's it. But there are so many actors and so many different processes in that chain. And in a way, it shows that nowadays trust is really everything. So from everyday communication to the way society works, nothing works without trust. And I read this book once when I was preparing a keynote speech for my former CEO. And really, the connection between technology and payments and trust, it's really huge. So it's an interesting reading.
Fascinating. I will definitely add this to my reading list, because I'm actually in a whole reading phase of trust. My recommendation is actually a Misbelief by Dan Ariely, and basically it touches on trust and how our opinions are shaped by irrational misconceptions. The subtitle is "What Makes Rational People Believe Irrational Things," and it's a really, I mean, if you know Dan Ariely, he's done a lot of work on behavioral psychology, and there, his most recent book shares his personal experience, having actually been at the receiving end of conspiracy theories and people saying that he was behind COVID-19. And so a personal experience, and then he tried to analyze this through his knowledge of behavioral psychology and trying to understand how people form these insane opinions, flat earth or other crazy belief systems, and how is that supported. And I think it goes to what you were saying, it's about trust. And in fact, a lot of people are now saying that we are living in a low trust environment. If you look at the Edelman Trust Barometer, people less and less trust institutions, politicians, journalists, etc. And so the question is, what can we do to rebuild trust between people, between communities, between polarized groups? So this is part of my journey into the exploration of trust and the fragmentation and polarization of society that we're living in. So with that, I want to thank you very much for coming on the show and for your advice. I think it's going to be very interesting to share that with the audience so that people can improve their content. Have a fantastic long weekend, and we will see you online, probably on LinkedIn. Have a great weekend. Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much.